Okay, so I got myself good little bit of boost of energy here in the form of whiskey. Mmm. Here we go. Mmm. Hoonigan tears. Very special. Very special cup indeed. Created by craftsmen. You know. And history is an exchange between, well, the powers that be, those who have the money and the resources, and those who create, right? And those who have knowledge, because there's more than one kind of wealth. And this is one of the things I don't like about modern day society as it is in 2022. Well, we're at the end here, going into 2023. About Okay, so we're touching on okay, so again, Communist Manifesto in this introduction by Gareth Stedman Jones, and he's talking about. So I'm gonna put the bookmark back in. Then this, okay. So as an aside, I made this in college in my aircraft structures course. It's my bookmark, and this has been with me for a very long time. And this came with me on the bus and marked my place and all the classics, like John Steinbeck, Kurt Vonnegut, uh, let's see, Finnegan's Wake. I read that. I read Kafka. I read, other ones out of the anthology. Scheisse. Lots of reading, because the ride from here to Fanshawe on the Highbury bus is about an hour. So lots of time to fill, And what are you going to do? And what were you supposed to do in that time except read? And now people use that time to look on their phones. So I'm gonna read this introduction part that I not to take it out of context, but I'm gonna go about okay. So the contributions of Adam Smith here.
Well, it must be a crazy person.
There you go. Okay. Smart like a fox. Don't fox with me. Okay. That's not a threat. That's just me trying to do a joke here. Judge me how you will, lest ye be judged. Okay, so if Marx did not feel too devastated by Steiner's attack, it was because in the course of 1844 he had already begun to elaborate an alternative route to communism. As will become apparent, this new theory was scarcely less speculative and certainly more reductive than the position he had outlined in the 1844 manuscripts. But its great attraction was that it provided an escape from dependency upon the psychological pieties of Feuerbachian anthropology. Feuerbachian. I don't know this fella. I'm going to have to look that up. And more generally, from any visible association with the neo-Christian moralism characteristic of most French and German socialism at the time. Okay, so 1844 in this, you can see some parallels, because we've gone a little too far to one side and a little too far to the other, and we have to return to a balance of all things, a more natural order. The I'm going to use a terminology. I like the good reset. I'll slow things down a little bit more and be more humanistic. Again, the ethnic supremacy of looking after our own, historical families first in the lands that we're on and so forth. In order to redistribute the power. Okay, so that's a bit of a communist idealism, is seizing the means of production, of political production. So in the case of an artist, it's the media, right? And usurping the middleman who profits off of the product by which we all produce as intellectual property. You know, whatever my idea is, that's what my idea is. Now, I don't explicitly agree with communism because this is a utopian idealism, as I've stated before. You know, but the craftsman must be respected. The artist must be paid. You see, we're not going to do things for exposure. It's never just for exposure or a career for which you have to suck a dick in order to get in. Back to it. The new position was outlined in the unpublished German ideology, which Marx composed together with Engels in Brussels between 1845 and 1847. This new theory was built out of three overlapping preoccupations that had emerged from Marx's abandonment of a Hegelian form of political rationalism in 1843. So Hegelian dialect, that's an important thing to be educated about. These were political economy, the history of law, and the property, and the debate about communism. So I'm doing a bit of drunk history here, a bit of referential humor. Okay, so Adam Smith, a very important guy, the wealth of nations here. So first, as a result of his readings, Marx replaced the still somewhat abstract opposition between alienated labor, a man's species being, by Adam Smith's conception of the development of the division of labor. Smith begins with the description of the 18 distinct operations performed by 10 men in the making of a pin. Smith estimated that through the subdivision of tasks, the 10 men were able to produce 48,000 pins per day, or 4,800 pins each. Had every pin been individually produced, Smith thought it unlikely that as many as 20 pins could be produced. Perhaps not one pin in a day. Building upon this example, Smith argued that the division of labor, so far as it can be introduced, occasions in every art a proportionable increase in the productive powers of labor, that the separation of different trades and employments from one another seem to have taken place in consequence of this advantage, and that this separation is generally carried furthest in those countries which enjoy the highest degree of industry and improvement. So having to do with disparity and having to do with the the number of the manpower ability, and that's where this problem, when I talk about the division of labor, and we talk about queer identities, and we talk about cultural, social justice, trying to enact a revenge for the unbilled labor of being a mother and so forth, right? The the sexual enslavement, that idealism, that idea and that concept, by extremists, in saying, trying to to monetize. That's a good term to use it, to monetize the laborer inside the household, because in the past, in the cultural context, had, the man going out being the hunter and the mother being the head of the household, and so the man takes care. This is a very old idealism, of North American tradition, that the man goes out and takes is the breadwinner, brings it back, and the woman is responsible for the things inside the house because she's not working. But because in the 1950s, after the Second World War, there's so many men had been killed off. There was there's this dearth, there's this gap in the division of labor and the power structure, and that for which was supported by certain financial groups to further bring women into the workforce and encourage them to remain in the workforce and have again the women got very well used to having their own income. And once you have your own income, you have freedoms, but freedoms come with responsibilities. See, there's a two-way street. It's not like having your cake and eating it too. You got to make the cake. Somebody's got to make the cake, right? Somebody's got to take the eggs from the chicken. Someone's got to churn the butter, and so on and so forth. Pay the man. Everyone thinks, or at least in these idealisms, in these concepts, that it's easy to be a man, but it ain't. Everyone thinks it's cool, and that the accoutrement, the nice things that come with leadership, are what give the status desirability. But being at the top isn't always desirable, because you have to take a tax from all angles. You have to decide and make very heavy and weightful decisions. That's what power is about. Power is about responsibility. It's not about status. Okay, the division of labor, so far as it can be introduced, occasions in every art a proportional increase in the productive powers of labor. That the separation of different trades and employments from one another seem to have taken place in consequence of this advantage, and that this separation is generally carried furthest in those countries which enjoy the highest degree of industry and improvement. So as another reiteration. The division of labor in Smith's account began not as the result of human wisdom or foresight, but rather as the necessity through which very slow and gradual consequence of a certain propensity in human nature, so potential and inclination, the propensity to truck, barter, and exchange one thing for another. So at me as a tradesman, the highest part of the trade, right? From the bottom end, it's the labor, okay? The second is the skill, right? In the middle. And at the top, it's intellectual. It's the exchange of information. Because without the exchange of information, there is no labor, okay? There's no labor. If you don't know what you're doing, don't do it. That's very much a classical attitude amongst tradespeople. And it is very much essential as an aircraft mechanic to have critical reasoning skills and have an understanding of psychology. Hence why the human factors is taught here in Canada as part of a regular occurrence. And you look at the title here in Canada, and it's aircraft maintenance engineer. Okay. There needs to be respect for that. Because without AMEs and without any tungsten, no tungsten carbide, no freaking airplane. No AMEs, no freaking airplane. Nobody flies. The whole world stops. And the internet means nothing. Let's be clear about that. Aircraft mechanics deserve better. We deserve better treatment. And I'm going to stand here and say that right now, because having been part of this machine, and having been trucked around, and having been bartered around and exchanged as a person, as a means of labor, right? After a while, it becomes demeaning and a means of exploitation, because the middleman is really the one that profits off of all of this, and the customer is really the one that profits off all of this. Mark my words. I don't care if I make enemies by making these statements, because a redistribution needs to happen. Okay? In the same way that the sexual power in the court system needs to happen. There needs to be a rebalancing of this. And as the pendulum swings from one end to the other, right? I don't believe in victimhood ideology. I'm not going to sit here and extol the virtues of, oh, this all happened to me, and now I'm going to do nothing, and I'm just going to leech off the system until I die. Because as a responsible person in a society, we all need to contribute something, whether it be intellectual or it be creative or it be labor. This is the means by which we all survive, and it's by the very trade itself. So here I am. And again, I don't necessarily agree with all the tenets of communism. I want some individuality, because this utopian idealism is used now by the soldiers of foreign actors and demoralizers, by using the corrupted people that are the rainbow warriors and the transgenders. Okay, again, transgenderism. That's my coin. I'm sticking to it. It's a trend. The body dressing, as I just cited in a previous video, even by queer writers, they're saying, okay, so fashion, in the extreme end, fashion the body through body modification in order to fit the clothes, in order to have a certain status, in order to usurp and undermine the power structure and create a new one. But the thing is that it doesn't work like that. You can't just tear it down and expect everything to work, because it's an animal farm principle. What happens to the pigs in Animal Farm? Right? They cause a rebellion, right? They take down the farmer, and then they become the aristocrats themselves. And then they become the figures for which they had hated. But they want to maintain the position of power without doing any of the work. Okay, so what motivates this propensity to exchange was not benevolence, but self-love. And that's where I'm at. I'm doing this out of self-love. I love myself. I love the accomplishments that I've done in such a short period of time. What I don't love is how little I've been compensated for these sacrifices. Because it ain't worth it, man. It ain't. To go to fling myself across the country, pack up my entire life, exist in another locale for months on end, if not years. And then when I return home, everything's in shambles, and I got to spend months and months and months reestablishing not only relationships, but also an order of things. Systemize, organize. So be it. And so it goes. That's the trade-off. No, Zoe. Stay. High risk, high reward. Not now. Versus, steady plotting. But the steady plotting, in my interpretation, is a means of exploitation. It's another kind, because it's all a trade-off, according to the employer. And when I become the employer, I'll view things differently because I'm trying to look out for my own family. And as the the founder and leader of Steel Aerospace Structures, things might change. My viewpoints might change in the future, depending on the factors that are at play and the cultural context. No, not now. Not now. Not now. She's just going to keep scratching at the door. Come on. Hey, puppy. Who's a good girl? Hmm? You want up? Come on up. Come on. Come on. You can do it. You can do it. There you go. There you go. As agile as you were 5 years ago. Good girl. So, the dog is here, which makes me think about dog whistling, which is a means of triggering people into states of anxiety, right? People have been, especially the queers, right? These queer people, and these rainbow warriors. They've been trained through psychological principles in order to achieve a communist utopia, in which they're at the top. This. It's a very ancient elitism, having to do with pedagogy, if I remember correctly, and like Greco Roman warriors and the Spartans, gay warriors and so forth. They were the best. They had the best relationships, and so they fought better, so on and so forth. Oh boy. Off to the island of Lesbos for you. I only say that, and it'll probably be taken out of context because I know what's going to happen by me putting these videos up. Is that sooner or later someone's going to see what I say, and they're going to use it against me. I know that. But frankly, I don't give a damn. Okay. So lastly, since the division of labor was a result of the power of exchanging, it followed that the extent of the division of labor was always limited by the extent of the market. So the market so the price is only what the market can bear. So scarcity, and so forth, right? In other words, human material progress had proceeded in parallel with the growth of the market. Unlike the somewhat static idea of alienated labor, divisions of labor could be turned into dynamic core of a theory of social and historical development capable of operating in the antagonistic conjunction with what the 1844 Marx had called the true natural history of man. So what is the natural history of man? It's a social order. It's a hierarchy. And it's an established relationship of man and woman. That for which had not been fucked with for thousands of years. There goes the dog. You're the dog. Man, this is an interesting movie. Was redescribed as the development of man's productive forces. So here's the thing: is why is man and why is labor thought of as a product? This is all done in quantitative analysis form and function, as to say that our lives are only worth something if we produce something. And if you go by other religious interpretations, that's completely and utterly wrong. Humanity is, in my opinion, is not about how much we produce in a certain amount of time, how much technology we can have in order to, dominate, and the usage of such, over other people. Domination tactics, absolutely. By the use of technology, we allowed women, this is my opinion, feel free to disagree, we allowed women to play into the worst parts of their behavior, and that for which they destroyed society. Because men build things and women organize things. You see, there's a sympathetic relationship. We can't just have one without the other. It doesn't work like that. And to have one dominant over the other doesn't necessarily work all the time either, because any good household has a cohesive partnership. You have to have that in order to raise children or in order to foster something. The level of divisional labor was now made dependent upon the development of the productive power at any particular time. Each new productive force causes a further development of the divisional labor. It was the growth of productive forces that had been responsible for the introduction of divisional labor into human history. So the concept, okay, so he who does the work, etc., etc. Oh yeah, I don't want him doing it. He ain't that good. Get him out of here. A consequence of increased productivity, the development of needs, and the growth of population. So the great replacement, theory, which has been exacerbated by voluntary extinction through propaganda stating that the world has too many people. But what really is happening is that you have a bunch of people sitting on the technology, and we have a very wasteful society here in North America, through consumerism and so forth. There's always a product on the shelf, no matter what. It's like the 24-hour news cycle, or YouTube, for that matter, in which or TikTok or Instagram, where there's always a continuous amount of product, which is the intellectual, the IP. Okay, my face in a frame, that brings people to the platform, and you make money off of advertising dollars. Okay, so no. Advertising dollars. Edward Bernays, the Century of the South, propaganda, rainbow propaganda, and then there's a religious context to transgenderism, that for which I will not touch on today, because it's very controversial, right? But I already talked about how there's dangers in progressivism and then trying to just change things for the sake of changing them. It's a path that leads to hell, because hell is paved. They say the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and bad people take advantage of people with good intentions. Okay, similarly, as a result of the consequence need to regulate the contradiction between the particular and the common interest assumes an independent form of the state, an illusionary community. The essence was the division of labor, like alienated labor, was that it was not voluntary. Okay, so the essence of the division of labor, like alienated labor, was that it was not voluntary. So society, the structure of the society, right? Okay. As long as man remains in naturally evolved society, as long as an activity is not voluntary, but naturally divided. Man's own deed becomes an alien power opposed to him, which enslaves him instead of being controlled by him. So this is what I was saying in previous comments just not a couple of minutes ago. Okay, that's good enough. I've got a little bit more here. Indeed, the division of labor encapsulated on global historical scale what Marx had first found objectionable in Hegel's portrayal of civil society, the abandonment of the everyday social life of modern man to chance. Because of the division of labor, Marx wrote, the relationship of supply and demand hovers over the earth like the fate of the ancients, and with invisible hand allots fortune and misfortune to men, sets up empires and wreaks empires, causing nations to rise and disappear. You see, it's just the thing is that this is missing. The Communist Manifesto is missing the components of slavery, and it's missing, a modern day context, that for which has been created and made artificial, the goalposts of the argumentation, that for which is the war between the sexes and also the war between genders. How dare you misgender me, etc. Because it has to do with okay. So next part is the history of law and property. But if we don't have rules and we don't have goalposts in order to frame an argument, then it doesn't mean anything, right? Competition is implicit to cooperation, and cooperation is implicit to competition. Whoa, 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 boy, boys will be boys. Whoa. Yeah. But the abolition of private property, the communist regulation of production, and the absolution of the alien attitude of men to their own product, the power of supply and the demand would be dissolved into nothing, and men would once more gain control of exchange, production, and the way that they behave to one another. So again, you're only worth as much as what you produce. That's the quantification that I come to. Okay, so preface to the English edition of 1888. So as it goes, the manifesto was published as a platform for the Communist League, a working men's association first exclusively German, later on international and under political conditions of the continent before 1848, unavoidably a secret society. At Congress of the League, held in London in November 1847, Marx and Engels were commissioned to prepare for publication a complete theoretical and practical party program. Drawn up in German, in January 1848, the manuscript was sent to the printers in London a few weeks before the French Revolution of February 24th. A French translation was brought out in Paris shortly before the insurrection of June 1848. The first English translation, by Miss Helen Macfarlane, appeared in George Julian Harney's Red Republican, London, 1850. A Danish and Polish edition had also been published. The defeat of the Parisian insurrection of June 1848, the first great battle between proletariat and bourgeoisie, drove again into the background for a time the social and political aspirations of the European working class. Thenceforth, the struggle for supremacy was again, as it had been before, the Revolution of February, solely between different sections of the proprietary class. The working class was reduced to a fight for political elbow room, and a position of extreme wing of the middle class radicals. I don't have context for that. Whether independent proletarian movements continued to show signs of life, they were ruthlessly hunted down. Thus, the Prussian police hunted out the Central Board of the Communist League, then locating in Cologne. The members were arrested, and after 18 months of imprisonment, they were tried in October 1852. So what this really says to me is that the Communist Manifesto was more or less about establishing trade unions. It was not necessarily, okay, if you're going to extrapolate this further, but again, this is opinion. bourgeoisie and proletarians. Yeah. You're supposed to establish trade unions as a counteracting to those who are rich, so those who have resources and don't produce, versus those who produce and don't have. So it's a whole thing about it's a really why artists are very much have a propensity towards communism. Trade unions and so forth, atelier, schools, and but they have their own hierarchies inside themselves. The classical studio models. Alms for the poor. Alms for the poor. Okay. A specter is haunting Europe. The specter of communism. All the powers of old Europe have entered into a holy alliance to exorcise this specter. Pope and Tsar, Metternich, Guizot, French radicals, and German police spies. Excuse me. Where is the party in opposition that has not been decried as communist by its opponents in power? Where the opposition that has not been hurled back at the branding reproach of communism against the more advanced opposition parties as well as against its reactionary adversaries? Two things result from the fact. Communism is already acknowledged by all European powers to be itself a power. 2. It is high time that communism should openly, in the face of the whole world, publish their views, their aims, their tendencies, and meet this nursery tale of the specter of communism with a manifesto of the party itself. To this end, communists of various nationalities have assembled in London and sketched the following manifesto, to be published in the English, French, German, Italian, Flemish, and Danish languages. The history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles. Freeman and slave, patrician and plebeian, lord and serf, guildmaster and journeyman, in a word, oppressor and oppressed, stood in the constant opposition to one another, carried on an uninterrupted, now hidden, now open fight, a fight for each time ended, either in a revolutionary reconstitution of the society at large or the common ruin of the contending classes. In the earlier epochs of history, we find almost everywhere a complicated arrangement of society into various orders, a manifold gradation of social rank. In ancient Rome, we have patricians, knights, plebeians, slaves. In the Middle Ages, feudal lords, vassals, guildmasters, journeymen, apprentices, serfs. In almost all of these classes, again, subordinate gradations. So this is where it gets dangerous. Trying to usurp the actual division of labor, because this is utopian, heaven on earth kind of stuff. But really, what it brings about is hell on earth. And